It's Jon S Sports Channel here again, where you get everything Championship League One and running even. So we're going with the review now of Championship Week 8, and we go straight in at the Burnley Plymouth game. And I was watching this at the watch along alongside a Plymouth fan, and Burnley were certainly very, very strong throughout that game, and the possession figures were showing that they were certainly the most likely to come out with a win. But as the game went on and progressed, you could see that they weren't quite clinical in front of goal. Not clinical as much as you would expect an ex-Premier League squad. And some of those shots just should have been and could have been that little bit better. And I just didn't think that was quite up to scratch for what you would expect of a squad like that. And then after the goal, we saw Plymouth sort of sit back and sort of try and soak up some of that force and that energy, and they did really well. Now in the last quarter of that game, I want to just go through that, because up to that point Burnley had been on top, and Burnley certainly looked good for their 1-0 lead. In fact, they looked good for probably a 2 or 3-0 lead. Then all of a sudden Plymouth started to come back, and the possession figures showed it. If you actually looked at the possession figures, I was doing it in the watch along, and it went from quite a low figure for Portsmouth for Plymouth, wrong port, for Plymouth, all the way from 10-15% possession more. So the average had gone way up, and Plymouth were actually holding the ball, and they were playing the ball, and they actually suddenly looked like they could nick an equaliser. And Plymouth's ability to turn that game, even though they'd been hemmed in for 75% of that game, was absolutely astonishing. I thought Plymouth overall were extremely good for their money. They came back in that last quarter fighting. They could have nicked it. They didn't nick an equaliser. Burnley, on the other hand, showed their class, showed their style, showed their technical ability. Not quite as much as they could have done, but most of you thought it was going to be a Burnley win, and most of you thought right. I didn't see many say 1-0 to Burnley. Most of you going with 2-1, 3-0, 3-1, and thinking it was going to be a lot higher score for Burnley. But in the end, I had to go with one of you that said, well, actually, I think Plymouth can keep an equaliser, can get that equaliser here, and they can play away a little bit like brick wall type football and just keep them out. And I had to agree with you. I thought that this was possible. And I went with Burnley 1, Plymouth 1. And boy, it nearly was. But in the end, it was Burnley 1, Plymouth 0. Well, wrong result, but I tell you what, that was only just. And we go to Cardiff versus Millwall next. And Cardiff 1, Millwall 0. And we went with a Cardiff 0, Millwall 2, because Millwall have been getting quite good recently, and they've been showing their prowess a little bit more away from home. They've been really good at home, really good technical abilities, and I thought that side could do this against a side that were at that point in 24th, remember. And I was quite shocked, because Cardiff came out playing pretty decent, and they were good for their 1-0 win, but they were only good for their 1-0 win because I think that the shots that came from Millwall were lame. We had 11 shots for Millwall, and only 5 on target, which is really good. But they scored none of them. They were just not good shots, and they weren't match winning, if you know what I mean, and just never looked like scoring, even though they were having shots on goal. Whereas Cardiff, with their 10 shots and 5 on target and 1 in the net, showed that they could play pretty decent football on Tuesday. So 49% play to Cardiff, 51 to Millwall. I think Cardiff took the bull by the horns, got that home support, and they managed to turn that home support into stopping Millwall from having any really decent shot on target. And when they did have a shot on target, it was pretty poor. Wasn't the side they expected to come out. So in the end, it was Cardiff 1, Millwall 0. And again, another poor result. In fact, this week, this Tuesday has beaten me for a poorish result from the Saturday before. Come on, guys! I need your help. More predictions in the comments down below, please. As we move on to Coventry versus Blackburn, I do mean that, please. Like, subscribe, and more comments down below. I do follow what you're saying. I do try and mix that in with what I'm thinking and come out with a decent prediction. But unfortunately, Tuesday's was pretty bad. Coventry versus Blackburn. Now, Coventry in 21st versus Blackburn in 3rd. Who would have bet against Blackburn? It's just been going the run of the green. It's not been that they've been playing brilliant. It's been they've got the run of the green and the look of playing the right teams at the right time, or the right teams at the wrong time. Now, Coventry had 46% possession. Blackburn had 54. 18 shots to Coventry, and if you watch the game, Coventry were just peppering that goal. 8 of those shots were on target, 3 in the net. They were very, very good for their money, and Coventry didn't look like a team in 21st position. They really didn't. All of a sudden, Coventry look like the team they were last year, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, we've got the Coventry team back. The fans must be amazed, because that team played amazingly. That it was clinical. The passing was good. The crossing, I thought, was pretty good. Not always excellent, but it was pretty good. Blackburn, on the other hand, with 54% of the possession, only managed to get 10 shots and only 3 on target, and didn't even get any of those in the net. Blackburn didn't look like scoring. They just didn't. They didn't get the run of the green, and at the end of the day, that's about all I can say. Blackburn sort of turned up, but not really. It was almost like the Coventry was the team there out, and they insisted that they weren't going to stay in 21st. We are going to win, and that attitude certainly showed through. What did you all say before? 0-0, 2-2, a couple of 1-1-1. I went with a sort of mix of both of you, thinking that the run of the green would probably go with the one in 3rd place. So I went with Coventry 0, Blackburn 1. It was Coventry 3, Blackburn 0. And completely wrong result there. And we go to Luton versus Oxford. I was watching this one there. I kept my eye on this one. Luton versus Oxford. This was an amazing game, wasn't it? Luton there. I don't think the Liam Walsh sending off really made any difference, to be quite honest. But Luton Town went into that into their 2-0 up, and they must have thought at half-time, going into half-time, they were going to be flying. But then Tyler Goodrum sort of spoilt it on 45, and Rodriguez equalised on 54. Now, I'd say this was a game of two halves, and it really was, because Luton had 40% possession and Oxford had 60%. But most of that came in the second half for Oxford, and Oxford really came back quite surprisingly. In the first half, it was all Luton. From what I could see, it was all Luton. And Luton were clinical, they were precise, they were exact. It looked like Luton would just whitewash Oxford by half-time. And then that goal just sort of... It's always bad letting a goal in on 45. And Luton let a goal in on 45 and never looked back, because they just didn't look the same team. Coming out in the second half and going through the second half, Oxford actually started to ramp up the pressure. So much so that we ended the game with 12 shots to Luton, 4 on target, 2 goals, which is actually pretty good. It's sort of average for the top half of the Championship. And Oxford ended up with 19 shots on target. Well, for their 60%, that's pretty decent. That's still decent. 8 shots on target, which is really good, and 2 in the net, which is again about average for the top half of the Championship. So they're now playing, to me, a really good Championship class football, and they're doing it statistically in a sort of Championship class for the upper half of the Championship. So I think Oxford now has started to show that they can indeed cement that position in just around sort of 12th, 10th, 13th position, and I think that's possibly where they're going to stay, because they really have shown that they don't let the heads drop if they go behind, and they can come back. And I think that's going to be key for those middle teams in the Championship. Let's say we went with a sort of mix of everybody and went that Luton would be coming back. They were in 19th, Oxford in 11th, but Luton are a lot better than that, aren't they? The ex-Premier League, they have still got that class in the team. You were saying 2-2, 1-0, 2-0 to Luton. I went with most of you and went with a Luton 2, Oxford 1. It was Luton 2, Oxford 2. So we weren't far off, but I think that we didn't expect that fight back by Oxford, and that was absolutely amazing. If you're an Oxford fan listening to this, you should be proud of that team. That was an absolutely battling performance. So let's go for the Norwich-Leeds, and Norwich-Leeds was really well matched. This is one for the neutral, although the Norwich fans and Leeds fans might not agree with this. The penalty was just ridiculous. Should not have given that. That was a silly tackle, and it was always going to be difficult for the ref not to give a penalty. But after that and before that, it was really quite one-sided. Well, it was really quite. It wasn't one-sided. It was quite even all the way through. It was one way, then the other, then one way, then. It was really back-to-back football, and I enjoyed it. It was great football, good technical ability, good. I think that the brilliance up front actually seemed to be matched by the brilliance in defence. And we all thought that it was going to be high scoring, 3-2s, 3-0s, 3-1s. I went with Norwich 3, Leeds 2, and it was Norwich 1, Leeds 1. It was one of those games where people were saying it wasn't going to be a draw, but it was going to be heavily goal-ridden in one way or the other. So we didn't get the score right there. But I tell you what, the stats, 46% possession to Norwich, 54 to Leeds. You know, it was as good as 50-50 when I was looking at it. It just looked 50-50. And I don't think that the shots really, the stats don't really match the game for me. 7 shots at target for Norwich, 1 on target, 1 goal. Whereas Leeds had 14 shots at target, 3 on 14 shots at target, 3 on target and 1 in the net. And you'd think that Leeds were actually the better side in that, but I just didn't think that was the case. I thought that was actually quite even and quite end to end, and I enjoyed that game. So both sides should be quite happy about the result. I think it was a good game of football, good to watch, enjoyable. Thanks for providing an entertaining game, because that's what we got. Not the correct result that we expected, but hey, great game. QPR versus Hull next, and I think this is the one where the Hull guy backed into him with his bum, and the QPR guy went down in the box like a sack of spuds. Never, I think it is. I'm sure it is, and if it is, it was never a penalty. It was all Hull City. Hull were just so clinical, and when they got it in the box and they had that chance, they made certain it was a cracker of a shot. Although, you know, we have to think that QPR weren't exactly away from shooting at goal. They just didn't have that final oomph. And when they did shoot at goal, it was a sort of trickle or a gentle tap, and it just didn't quite have that class and that style and that end product. 47% possession to QPR, 53 to Hull City is about right. 21 shots to QPR, 7 on target, which is actually pretty decent for a mid-table side. But only 1 goal, and that was from a penalty, so it's not counted in the stats. Now, you have to think that there's something wrong with that finish, and there was all the way through the game. 15 shots to Hull, 6 on target, 3 in the net. That's what I mean. More clinical, more precise. What did we say? A lot of you saying 2-1 to Hull, 2-0 to Hull, 1-1. Nobody actually saying QPR, and you were all right. I went with what QPR 1, Hull 2, and it was QPR 1, Hull 3. So we got a correct result there. Not a correct score, but a correct result. But we go on to our next one, which is Sunderland versus Derby. And this is where we actually managed to get both here. So we're going to go through the stats first, because this was certainly a game of one team. And Sunderland absolutely overran this game, I think. Several times I saw the ball come down from attack by Sunderland, and you'd see 2 defenders at the back for Derby, and where are the other 2 gone? They've gone on holiday or something? They were disappearing. That back line of Derby's just didn't seem to be anywhere. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been what QPR tended to do. I mean, on one of the Hull goals, I think QPR had about 7 or 8 people in the box all gathered together. It was like they're having a huddle. But this one was completely the opposite. It's like, where have they gone? They've gone missing. So it was, to me, always going to be Sunderland. I was surprised it was only 2-0, to be quite honest. But Derby did manage to stop them getting past the back end of defence, back end of midfield quite well. That midfield was quite sturdy, and they just stopped Sunderland from getting through quite as often as as you would expect. So 51% possession to Sunderland, 9 shots, 3 on target. With the amount of with the amount of play and technical ability they were showing, it didn't look like a 51%. It looked more in the game, and it looked like they were actually able to, or should be, putting more shots in. I would have expected from looking at that game that those shots would have been a lot higher, because they had the ability and the technical class to be able to do that. But then Derby County, 13 shots at target, only 5 on target, which is actually quite good for a mid-table side. But those 5 on target, none went in the net, because they just didn't seem to be quite good enough. And I tell you what, the Sunderland goalkeeper was absolutely cracking on the day. So when Derby did do a good shot, Sunderland's goalie was up to it, and it went out. So partially thanks to the Sunderland goalkeeper, Derby never managed to get back into it, and that was not surprising when you look at the game overall and saw how Sunderland seemed to just run that game and control it all the way through. So I said Sunderland 2, Derby 0. It was indeed Sunderland 2, Derby 0. We got one, thank you guys. And we go on to West Brom versus Borough. It's not time to celebrate, because it wasn't a very good day for me. And you need to give me more support. Give me some comments on your predictions for next week. Like, subscribe, click the bell. Give me those comments. I need them. West Brom versus Borough next. And West Brom didn't really turn up for me. They didn't really seem to be in the game. Although West Brom, it was really 50-50. It was 51% to West Brom and 50% to Borough. West Brom had 11 shots, 1 on target, which is not good enough, and it's certainly not good enough for the top half of the Championship. And that one didn't go in the net. Whereas Borough had 15 shots and 4 on target, which is sort of not. It's okay for mid-table, but a top 6 side needs to be doing better than that. And of those 4, 1 went in the net, which is probably about right for mid-table. But Borough played better football. I think this was probably a correct result when you look at the game overall. I didn't really enjoy it. It was a little bit dull, a little bit lapse. There was a lot of short passing and trying to keep the ball, and then when you lost it, the opposition would short pass it and try and keep the ball. Wasn't a great one for the neutral, I'm afraid. A lot of you saying 1-0 to West Brom. Did see someone say 2-1 to Borough. Well done, that person, because it was indeed West Brom 0, Borough 1. Very tight game in the end. We did think it was going to be tight, and it was only going to be 1 goal in it. Most people going the other direction though, and so we got an incorrect result there. 1 more. So Sheffield United versus Swansea, and Sheffield United. I think most people were thinking that Sheffield United would just scrape this, but they've not been doing brilliantly well. They've been scraping wins and scraping results, and although they're in 6th, Swansea are in 9th, and they're in 9th because they've been scoring goals and been getting the results as well as scoring goals. And I thought, they could do this. And I thought Sheffield United 0, Swansea 1. Most of you saying 2-0, 3-1, 3-0 to Sheffield United for some strange reason, but you were actually right, and again I was wrong. My joker got played, and it was totally destroyed, and it was Sheffield United 1, Swansea 0. Sheffield United actually only had 34% play, but they've done this regular in a few games that I've seen. Swansea 66% possession. Only 8 shots and 1 on target, and it didn't go in the net. Sheffield United, they've been showing their Premier League class by showing that finishing quality. 15 shots for Sheffield United in that 34% possession, which is brilliant. It means that they got the ball, gone straight up the other end and had a shot. Of those 15, 3 were on target, 1 went in the net. That's all you need. Although they didn't score their goal, it was Josh Timone from Swansea. So I have to move on. Not a correct result, not a correct joker, and we go to Preston versus Watford. Preston versus Watford was... This is another one of those dull games. I didn't really enjoy it. I thought Preston were certainly more in the game. Watford actually had a great... I thought Watford were, for most part, the better team, but Preston just seemed to use the ball better. When they had it, they were more dangerous, and it was odd because you could see the ability of the Preston side to just burst out and have a shot. 15 shots from their 44% possession, 6 of them on target, 3 goals. You could see how clinical they were, how brilliant they were at just running forward and getting it in the net. But Watford were better for most of that game, but they only got 10 shots, but they got 6 of those on target, and none of them went in the net. The Preston goalie was absolutely brilliant, I thought, and he really did master that back line and get them all set up really, really well. And I think that was the difference. That was the difference, totally the difference. What were you saying? 1-1, 1-2, 0-2. Again, I played with most of you and sort of went, yeah, I think Watford will win this one. 1 or 2 goals, 3 goals in it, you thought. I went with Preston 0, Watford 2. It was Preston 3, Watford 0. And in the end of the day, it was a clinical ability of Preston that did it. And that, although Watford were, to me, the better team, didn't make any difference, did it? So we move on to Stoke versus Portsmouth, and my local side, Portsmouth, I don't think they turned up. I really don't think they turned up. They got that goal on 29 to equalise. And up to that point, I thought it was pretty much 60-40 to Stoke City. And you could see that there's going to be a ding-dong of a match coming. But then Portsmouth just seemed to disappear and not come out to play. Stoke 6, Portsmouth 1. Portsmouth never looked a threat to me. Quite often in games like this in this season, they've not had a shot on goal. But Portsmouth did have 9 shots, 2 on target, 1 in the net. You know, quite often, like I say, when it's been so one-sided, they've had 0 shots and they've been right at the back. And I mean 0 shots and 0 on target. 20 shots to Stoke, 8 on target, which is okay, pretty good. It's certainly good for a team who was in 20th. And 6 of those 8 went on in the net. So, you know, you have to think, brilliant. Stoke City, have they come back? You know, a lot of us thought in our pre-season rambles that Stoke City would be really good at the back, but where are they going to get the goals at the front? And from the beginning, we suddenly realised that actually they can actually score. And it's the back end that we thought was going to be good that's not that great. And they've shown it here, but 6-1 win for Stoke City. We thought it'd be a 1-0 win to Portsmouth, so we write that one off. I actually didn't see anybody say a Stoke win, which is quite impressive. I saw a few draws. And lastly, Bristol City versus Sheffield Wednesday, and Bristol City. I think Bristol City were good for the money here. To me, Bristol City were. I mean, they had 60% possession, and it looked like they had 60% possession. Wednesday just didn't seem to be able to get out of that midfield. They could get to the midfield. I kept seeing them on the watch-along get to midfield, but then they just fizzle out. 10 shots to Bristol City. I would have expected more, but Sheffield Wednesday were doing a blockade at the back, and it was a damn good tactic. It did work. 10 shots to Bristol City. 2 on. They reduced them to only 2 on target, which shows how good their back line was, and it really was sturdy. They like doing the sort of offside trap and trying to push it forward, and all that sort of stuff worked. Whereas Sheffield Wednesday, 40% possession, 7 shots, only 1 on target. Again, no goals, and I think it was the two back lines that really ran this one. I didn't really see much from Beadle, so can't really say much on that. But certainly, I would be saying those 2 back lines were absolutely solid on that day. 3-3, 1-1, 1-1, 2-2. You were all saying a draw. I didn't actually get anyone say it wasn't going to be a draw. Bristol City 1, Sheffield Wednesday 1 is what I said. It was Bristol City 0, Sheffield Wednesday 0. And that's Jon S Sports Channel for another review. And I really do need your help here, guys. Put your comments below. Tell me what you think next weekend's results will be. And we'll be back with a prediction video very soon. Thank you very much.